All right, we're going to get started here with our webinar just 2 minutes after the hour. We wanted to let everyone roll in, and we'll give it away to Beth Ann and our panelists.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Beth Ann Noble. I'm the head of marketing at Continual.ai. I also want to thank our great friends at Rudderstack for hosting this webinar and inviting me along to moderate our awesome panel discussion today. Today, we're going to talk about new data-centric approaches to the MarTech stack, including using data and analytics like machine learning and AI to drive intelligent, personalized customer experiences at scale. We're talking about things like when you purchase something, getting a personalized email with product recommendations, or getting a personalized offer when you might be about to switch to a competitor. You all decided to join this webinar today, so I don't think I have to convince you with respect to why this is so important. The reality is that using intelligent experiences for intelligent consumer engagement is becoming a key differentiator, and it's really a C-level boardroom focus for big incumbent brands as well as challenger brands alike. On that note, we are super excited to have our customer special guest from one of those innovative brands that's using intelligent customer experiences. Pardon me, sorry about that. We're super excited to have Himanshu Sinha from Allbirds here, a very innovative brand that is very into using intelligent customer experiences, to be joined by our panel of data-first MarTech and data-first analytics leaders from Rudderstack and MessageGears and Continual. So with that, let's kick it right off. Want to remind you that welcome you to please submit your questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing those, and then we'll get into Q&A at the end. We also want to tell you about some special giveaways that we have toward the end of the webinar. So thank you again. Let's kick it right off with some introductions. Starting with our special guest, Himanshu. Tell us about what you do today. Tell us about your background in data and digital for customer experiences. And then also, if you could share just one thing that you find most exciting today about the art of the possible with what we can do with data for customer experiences.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward for our discussion today. My name is Himanshu, and right now at Allbirds. Allbirds, I know if all of you guys are aware what Allbirds is. Just for sake of, I'm gonna still say it. Allbirds is this kind of sustainable footwear lifestyle brand. Been around for almost 6 years now, and kind of like our kind of core tenet is how do we build sustainable but better, and that's kind of where the journey we are on. Right now, in my current role, I manage our digital business. Part of that is kind of really thinking about customer acquisition and customer retention, and how do we think about in D2C world, leveraging the data, leveraging the intelligence, and of course, ML and AI to kind of build that customer engagement. I've been here for almost a year and a half, but I've been kind of doing this kind of work for almost, I would say, like 10, 12 years now. Prior to that, I was in another D2C brand, Blue Nile, kind of using MessageGears and kind of similar architecture. Prior to that, I was at Expedia, kind of like when the data first was not even a term, we kind of really thinking about how we should be building our process around data at Expedia. That's how I got introduced to MessageGears. Prior to that, Amazon and kind of consulting. That's kind of where I've spent a lot of time. I think that for me, when I look at kind of the way where we are going, data as being the primary, the central cost in how we engage our customer, I think the possibilities are kind of endless. It's kind of how and where we talk to people, and then not just kind of in one-to-one way, in kind of, as you can imagine, in a lot more personalized way. It's about scaling that out and really understanding customer journeys and purchase journeys and being a facilitator of that rather than be kind of all over the place and having that conversation. So I'm looking forward for our discussions, and then hopefully the questions, I'll be happy to answer those and what we have done in the past.
Wonderful, Himanshu. Thank you so much. That is quite a track record. So we're so glad to have you here with your wealth of experience to share on this topic. Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, Himanshu, your resume is amazing. So that's a tough act to follow. I'm Eric, and I work in demand generation at Rudderstack. I actually started here on the customer success side, helping companies implement our products. And if you're not familiar with Rudderstack, we help you move customer data all around your stack. So we handle integrations. We help you get data into the warehouse and then back out of the warehouse, which we'll talk about. And I'm really excited to have the conversation today. It's been really fun to work with companies like Continual and MessageGears on the vendor side, and then companies like Allbirds as customers as they try to build out these modern data stacks. My background is actually in marketing with an emphasis on data. So I have been involved in a number of companies in the tech space and in the education space. And so I do have about a decade of experience probably trying to build these technology stacks that allow you to leverage your data to grow. And it's really been an amazing couple of years with the rise of the data warehouse and some of the modern architectures that companies like Allbirds are building to do things that were previously extremely difficult. So excited to talk through some of those things today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, thank you, Eric. Great, yeah. Marketer with data skills is an awesome winning combo. So glad you're here. All right, going in order of kind of the data flow, I'll hand it over to my colleague from Continual, Jordan.
Yes, hi, I'm Jordan. I'm the head of field engineering at Continual. It's great to be here, a very esteemed panel we have gathered. It's great to be a part of it. So I work in field engineering at Continual. If you're not familiar with Continual, we are an ML platform on top of the modern data stack. So we provide machine learning capabilities on top of your cloud data warehouse. So we'll be talking more about like the vision and kind of how this enables AI and ML use cases in this talk. My background, I've worked in a variety of roles over the past decade and a half, mostly all focused on data, but everything from software engineering to data scientists to systems architects. So I've had my hands in a lot of different pots, and I understand, pretty much all of the workflow that is needed to make a data use case successful. Currently at Continual, we're doing a lot of work with customers, helping them get their ML use cases into production with Continual. So we've been focused a lot on these type of customer engagement type use cases, customer churn, lead scoring, lifetime value, stuff like that. So happy to share my thoughts and experience on this call.
Wonderful, thank you, Jordan. Okay, and last but not least, we'll hand it over to the host of our webinar, my friend Walter from MessageGears.
Thank you, Beth Ann. Great to see your faces. I too am humbled to be part of this audience in a big way. My background, I've been with MessageGears about 4.5 years. I've had a number of kind of sales leadership, marketing leadership, and partnership leadership roles at high growth startups across my career. I currently run partnerships at MessageGears, and so this webinar is very much kind of a direct result of MessageGears being very proactive in terms of building out an ecosystem of kind of best of breed partnerships like Continual and Rudderstack, and then bringing in awesome practitioners like Himanshu from Allbirds, who we've known for a long time, to really talk about this alternate point of view that we are seeing emerge increasingly in the marketplace, where a brand's data sits at the hub of a solution environment, and then there's providers like Continual, Rudderstack, and MessageGears that just sit on top of that. For those of you that don't know MessageGears, we're a customer marketing platform that actually runs on top of a brand's existing data environment, which often includes like a Snowflake, a BigQuery, or Redshift. And very often we see a Continual or Rudderstack providing key features around that data warehouse first approach. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is kind of these alternate approaches to solving for sort of advanced use cases in a way that keeps the data warehouse kind of in the center and has a best of breed sort of modular approach around that to solve for what many people might call a set of customer data platform type of capabilities. So you might hear that term sprinkled around in this conversation in terms of CDP. But that's kind of the sandbox we're talking about today, and we're digging in specifically to some AI and ML use cases, which are super cool. And I can't thank our presenters and speakers and panelists enough for joining us today. It should be really fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Walter. Okay, great. Thank you for setting the stage there. So let's dive right in. Just a couple of the topics that we're going to uncover today as we unpack, what does it mean to be able to drive intelligent customer experiences at scale? We're first going to talk about a data first MarTech stack. What is this new approach? How is it different from what we've been doing and seeing before? Then we'll get into machine learning, AI. What is it? What can it do for us? Why is it kind of tricky? And then finally, what is this new kind of modern data stack architecture that can actually bring these capabilities to more businesses? It's about not having to be like the Fortune 10 or a FANG company to really be able to do this well. So let's get right into it. I want to start with this data first MarTech. And I want to hand this question to you, Eric. When we look at this kind of traditional SaaS versus this new model, I think about one of the keys to being able to unlock personalization and intelligence across the customer journey is about being able to do it in an end-to-end way, or like in an omni-channel, multi-channel way. So when I look at the left-hand side of this chart, I kind of see like silos, and on the right-hand side, I see something that looks a little bit more friendly to multi-channel and end-to-end personalization. So could you tell us, about what's going on here with this new approach?
Absolutely, and I think that anyone listening in or watching has felt the pain of what it means to run a stack like the one you have on the left side. And when we say data silos, that's a really interesting question. I think that's a term that I use all the time, and I think all of us in the industry throw around a lot. And I think a lot of times what that means for companies is that they have different versions of the truth, right? It's interesting if you think about, just as an outsider, you have a sales tool or a CRM, and then a marketing tool, and then maybe some sort of analytics tool. On top of that, they probably all have a similar set of fields in them, right? It's not like you can't map fields across these tools. But the problem that you run into inevitably is that each of these tools that's sort of fully vertically integrated has their own version of the truth, right? They have their own database structure. They have their own opinions about what, even things as simple as what does a contact record mean, right? How do you handle custom fields? How do you trigger workflows, et cetera? So from that standpoint, you end up having a bunch of different versions of the truth, which becomes very problematic when you try to answer difficult questions about the customer journey, sort of especially about across platforms, et cetera. But even more than that, and I think what'll be really interesting to hear Jordan and Himanshu talk about is the practical challenge of not being able to have a clean, complete data set that can actually drive an ML model. I mean, that's really, when we talk about personalization, that's really the starting point, right? Is the data and building a model from the data. So I think that's one side of it, is this, even if you can kind of get the same data point into whatever version of the custom field in every tool across your stack, it still is a fundamental rate limiter in terms of actually leveraging that data, especially for ML use cases. Then I think the other thing that we see a lot is it just creates a huge amount of data engineering debt, right? These siloed apps are vertically integrated, which means that you probably are installing some sort of SDK on some sort of platform. they're doing their own data ingestion. And then of course, that tool is probably a primary destination, but then you also need to get it into other places. And so you end up doing what we call daisy chaining, right? So you have, let's say your marketing tools SDK, it's collecting data, and then you need to get that data into, your CRM or this tool or that tool. And so you start daisy chaining. And as simple as it sounds, when you daisy chain across, systems that have different, definitions for things, you just create a lot of data debt over time. And then, of course, the integration debt of dealing with all these different SDKs. And so, 5 years ago, even, it was a monumental effort to do what people called customer 360, because you were dealing with integration debt and data consistency debt across your stack because of this vertically integrated sort of daisy chained architecture. And so along comes the data warehouse, which is certainly older than 5 years, but in terms of practical usage and the technologies surrounding it, to solve those problems, all of a sudden you can essentially get rid of all the vertically integrated tools and point everything at your warehouse, right? So that drastically simplifies the data engineering debt from an integration standpoint. And then now you can actually sort of cut beyond all of the marketing speak around customer 360 or complete customer journey. And it's really actually possible because all the data is in one place, your data warehouse. So I think even just those first two steps of solving the data consistency debt and then the integrations debt are game changing. But then really, and I think what's going to be exciting to talk about is now you've unlocked or sort of built the foundation that makes doing things with machine learning and AI possible, right? And I think what I'm interested to hear, from Jordan and Himanshu on is you can do that on your own terms because you're not beholden to an opinionated model from, a vertically integrated system. So we see companies moving from this vertical integration siloed architecture using tools like Rudderstack to actually unify everything in the warehouse and then activate that data. So that's kind of the pain and then the solutions and the trend that we're seeing towards how companies are solving that with a modern architecture.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, Himanshu, I would love for you to tell us, either in the arc of your career or at Allbirds, tell us about this journey through your own eyes.
I mean, I think Eric has summarized it well, but I'm gonna just rewind us further back, and then I'll take some of the blame of how we ended up with the traditional SaaS model. Like the first half of my career was in consulting, and we're always process first. What it means is kind of like you figure out what the business outcome is, business process we are trying to solve. And I remember all of my managers and partners used to say, once you fix the process, everything will be fine for the company. And then the data was always secondary. I mean, data is supporting the process, we're collecting it, tracking it, but data is not really driving any insights. It's just kind of supporting that business process. It could be sales process, it could be CRM process, it could be manufacturing process. Everything was built vertically to just support that business process. And then, I mean, all the pitfalls which Eric mentioned on, what is the problem with that is like your data is not complete, it's not true, multiple source of truth. So everything was running as a kind of what I call the local maxima, the local optimization, rather than a holistic optimization for the company. Sales is trying to optimize their thing, manufacturing is trying to optimize their thing, and of course CRM or customer engagement, everything is such a locally settled. And of course the technical challenges which Eric talked about is just kind of multifold the problem. So around 2015, when I took over as our customer marketing lead at Expedia, we were kind of thinking about how do we build around insights. Yes, we know we want to improve our customer engagement, customer experience, but rather than kind of solving it as a siloed problem, what do we need to do to kind of let the insights drive what the customer experience would be? So kind of the construct we thought of at that time, again, data first was not kind of an industry term. We kind of coined a term called insight as a product. And then like, how do we kind of put data at the center of how we make decision, what get enabled, what use case get enabled? Yes, we know the rough idea we are trying to go. The construct we had was kind of three-step process. how do we collect data, how do we synthesize the data, and how do we activate the data. And this construct is independent of the use cases, and it's just kind of built, and it's a data loop, right? So as kind of each phase of when we're extracting the data, collecting the data, feds into the synthesizing the data, where the insights are built, of course, will be basic as analytics driven insight, all the way advanced to AI, ML driven insights, feed into activation. As we're activating, customer are responding, it's coming back to our data collection. So we're kind of building this data loop in this modular approach. And then as kind of we're learning and understanding the insights, we are enabling use cases and business processes around it. So kind of that's kind of the architecture we had in my mind. I think there are two benefits we saw of that. One is it's very scalable and flexible, not necessarily just from the technical point of view, but also from business processes and outcome, and how do we activate that insight point of view. I mean, yes, today I remember we started with very specific email use cases, and by the time I left that role, we were activating our call center agents using the same insights which were kind of used in the email, and we are updating our app based on that data. So I think the whole idea of flexibility and scalability kind of help quite a bit. The second one is it's kind of just feeds into each other, right? Like as you kind of like step one, we're getting some data, we're creating insights, feeding into the second one, whether it's recommended actions, outcomes, predicting outcomes, and we can continue to iterate on that, right? We start with something very basic, we might try model A, great, model B much better, and so on. So it just build that on top of each other, and then data is driving these capabilities rather than a business process or business outcome. So I'm so happy that now 6-7 years later, it's kind of coming into more mainstream and the way we operate. So as kind of I moved into my next role at eBay, and then of course Blue Nile and Allbirds, we kind of took that construct and started building it out. And as kind of we are talking, and that's how I got Rudderstack into that, right? I mean, like, yes, we kind of assessed 5 or 6 different kind of CDP platforms when we were thinking about like, hey, we need to build a single truth of customers. And at the end of the day, we can like, hey, this is something such a big competitive advantage we could have if we do it right. So we need to kind of build, kind of assemble this thing together, and then kind of your collecting the data, synthesizing the data, and activating the data, and see what we have in the market. And Rudderstack was a natural choice because that's just exactly what we were looking to do, rather than building it in-house. I know we built that at Expedia from scratch, but a smaller company with limited resources, the players and the vendors like Continual and of course Rudderstack and MessageGears, they just give us the power and the tools which we cannot have if we're trying to build it in-house.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful recipe for repeatable success. Reminds me of kind of like an AI factory approach, kind of focusing on these data-centric building blocks and repeatable patterns and capabilities, and then just rinse and repeat and iterate and refine those for multiple use cases over time. That's wonderful. You make it sound easy, Himanshu. Before we move on, I really kind of want to double click on AI, but anything to add, Jordan or Walter, from what you're seeing at customers at MessageGears or Continual?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Himanshu and Eric really nailed it. I think, MessageGears, we tend to work with the CMO's organization, and this is still a pretty provocative construct, right? When you think about the world that B2C marketers have been living in for the last, let's just say 20 years, where they have their first party data, maybe 5 years ago was all sitting in Teradata, and now it's all in a Snowflake, right? They're still kind of institutionalized into thinking that they have to recreate their first party data in someone else's cloud, i.e. the figure 1 portion of the screen. And that's an unbelievably painful and expensive process for any brand that's got millions of customers of their own. And really, thanks to the Redshifts and the Snowflakes and the BigQueries and the Azures and the Databrickses of the world, really that's opened up a whole new approach, which is what's depicted in this screen. I mean, figure 2, I mean, you could give Hadoop some credit on this as well, but basically the rise of these cloud data warehouse providers with their highly elastic and highly performant capabilities has created this paradigm shift that you guys are seeing on the screen. And the business benefits of this are massive. I mean, they really are. I think Eric and Himanshu are being a bit humble in that sense in terms of not only the operational efficiencies around data movement, but also what's probably more important is the ability to drive meaningful and relevant customer experiences at scale and at speed. So, you know, gone are the days of 24 or 48-hour data lags in order to activate a campaign, i.e. an abandoned cart email, which is use cases that MessageGears deals with. This figure 2 model that Continual and Rudderstack and Himanshu, frankly, you know, is one of the original, he's being humble himself. I mean, he's sort of the OG on some of this stuff, but I mean, you know, he did this back in Expedia days when, you know, Snowflake didn't even exist, right? It was probably Hadoop or something similar. So the business benefits of customer engagement are massive, and the data security benefits in terms of your PII never leaves your private cloud. If you are Home Depot, Best Buy, Allbirds, T-Mobile, Rakuten, OpenTable, I'm just giving you like real examples of brands that see the world the way all of us on the phone do, and where in the way figure 2 do. It's just massive. I mean, it really is. And I don't think the rest of the ecosystem is getting this yet, but it's getting more and more common that this point of view is being shared, certainly by the VP of Data and Analytics inside of these consumer-facing brands. And increasingly, it feels like the marketers are seeing this as well. And it gives the data team a very tangible business impact to be able to point to as kind of the future for the brand. So you can see I get passionate. I'm sorry I talk so much, but that's kind of what we're seeing. I hope that helps, Beth Ann.
Yes, thank you, Walter. This is the real stuff, and that's why we're all passionate, because I think we've seen this. We're seeing this happen with our customers. We're seeing the difference it makes. So it's great to hear more from you. Let's go ahead and switch into another topic we want to cover today. So machine learning and AI, or essentially predictive analytics. I think the cloud data warehouse, Snowflake, all of these modern data tools built up around the cloud data warehouse have really enabled a lot more companies, more and more every day, to become data driven. But when it comes to machine learning or predictive models, things behave a little bit differently. You know, these are predictive models of the real world, of data that is describing the real world, and it's a world that's changing. So models need to be updated, and they need to be retrained. They need to be monitored. So it's a little bit of a different animal, and I think we're, you know, many folks are still kind of struggling to do this really well at scale. So I want to hand it over to you, Jordan, from Continual's perspective, from your expertise as a longtime data science and ML practitioner. You know, break it down for us. What is this? Why is it so different? What kind of opportunities does it open up?
Yeah, great question. So for anybody on the call who's not savvy in the ML field, like first question is, what is ML? ML is really just using data to make decisions without explicitly like telling the system how you want to make that decision. So what does that mean? It means we're going to engage in using algorithms that are going to look at our data. They're going to understand relationships on our data. They're going to then be able to make predictions about what is going to happen in the future. So the slide here has a lot of great use cases that I think are topical for this talk, where we're talking about sales and marketing and operations and other types of use cases. But a lot of what you see in machine learning is that companies are on a data journey, right? So they're getting their data sources, they're gathering them in their data warehouse, they're starting to do analytics, and like all of that, I think by now in 2022 is pretty much table stakes, right? Like I imagine if like I went to Himanshu and I said like, tell me how many shoes of type X we sold over the last 6 months and break it down by day, they'd be able to produce that like in a second. And it would be crazy to think that like his team wouldn't have an answer to that. But there was a time when like you maybe wouldn't be able to answer that question. And you'd say like, oh, well, we're gonna have to count all the receipts. So like this is gonna take, a month or two and we'll get an answer to you. So like that aspect I think has kind of, is now getting to the point where it's like almost taken for granted that like we have these capabilities on the data team. They understand how to do like the data storage, the analysis, the data engineering and all of that to answer these business type questions. And then the next level up is now, how can we get predictive? How can we start predicting what's going to happen in the future? Can we predict sales running in the next 6 months, 12 months, year, 2 years? Can we look at our customer base? Can we look at, who's at risk for churn? Can we analyze the behavior of how we're interacting with customers and say, who's likely to churn, who's not likely to churn? Can we feed that to the marketing team or the sales team to help them better retain customers? Can we look at all of the people that we're trying to target and try to score them based on their based on the percentage that they're actually going to come and convert it to a paying customer. So there's a lot of use cases in this area that are very topical. In the context of what we're talking about here, which is like this data first stack or this like connected app stack, from the machine learning perspective, you just need access to a lot of data, right? Like the more data we can feed these algorithms, the better results we're going to get. So if we end up in a spot where we're in that SaaS model and like every tool has its own database that's collecting its own data, it means like the data scientist's job is just like very terrible because you have to go out and like either you have to figure out how to get all the data or you have to like talk to your data engineering team to get all the data and they're like, I don't work on that system or whatever. So it gets very political quickly. With this connected app stack, it just makes the machine learning a lot easier because everything is like already being dumped into the data warehouse. If you give access to the correct tables, you can then enable all of these ML use cases very quickly. And it's actually kind of funny. For years and years, when I would chat with some of my other DS peers, we would joke about the fact that you could tell if a job posting, like you could tell a lot about a company from their data science job postings. If they were posting like skills that required API and web scraping capabilities, you knew that they were actually doing real work because that meant that they actually had gotten far enough in their use case discovery that they realized they didn't have access to all the data and they had to go get that data. And you would do that either via APIs, or if there were no APIs, you would probably have to like try to scrape it through the website or like whatever the application was. And then like, if you saw a job posting that didn't have this, you're like, all right, well, they're very early in their stage and they haven't gotten to this point yet. So I think as we, as people are evolving out of the Hadoop ecosystem and coming into the, what is now kind of the standard modern data stack cloud ecosystem, it should be a lot easier for you to just, use tools that are, dumping data out into your data warehouse, or use a tool like Rudderstack, which is connecting to all your applications and bringing them into your data warehouse. So tools like MessageGears and Continual can then work on them. Enables a lot of use cases. That's going to make your models good. Your predictions are going to be better. Your business is going to be happier. It just makes everything kind of gel a lot better in the end.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Sounds easy. Again, you made it sound easy. So Himanshu, tell us, is it that easy? Tell us about what you guys are working on at Allbirds in terms of machine learning use cases, kind of where you are relative to your vision. Is it easy? What are the challenges?
I mean, I'll just start at like one of my stories at eBay. So when I started eBay, as part of my team, I had around 11 data scientists working on different marketing use cases. And it's kind of part of onboarding. I started asking like, how do you kind of really spend your time? And one of the insights which came out, almost 80 to 85% of the time was just spent on data, like data engineering, extracting data, cleaning data, making sure data is ready for feature engineering, and kind of just that piece of like accessing data, make like all the work which you kind of, we glamorize that, hey, data science is building cool models. It probably was less than 10% of it. And the problem was basically what Jordan just described. It's not easy. Like if your systems are all over the place and your data is not easily accessible, you garbage in, garbage out in kind of machine learning models. And that's where I do feel that this data first approach kind of enables quite a bit of how do you take that data, build more insight, build more models, and kind of take into the activation and kind of learn and test and experiment things and really focus on improving customer experience rather than just kind of spending a lot more time on MLOps, if you want to call it, and then kind of back-end data engineering, all piece of it. So I'm that's again excited to see that this is kind of becoming a lot more mainstream, and then companies like us who doesn't have the capacity or skill set or capabilities to kind of get that same level of kind of outcomes as this kind of a larger company like eBay or Expedia can do with their engineering resources. Yes, infrastructure challenges, team challenges, like all of these are, and I live and breathe pretty much every day since I moved from eBay and Expedia and came to Blue Nile. And like how do we get the same outcome as these larger companies getting with lot less resources and lot less not the same level of skill set. So we are starting. I think, like, I mean, of course, at Expedia, we were a lot better in terms of what we were able to achieve. The way I look at the ML and AI, especially in the customer engagement, I'll give you an Expedia, like the way we were thinking about it. As kind of you go to a travel concierge, a travel agent, and then as you're having a conversation with him, he's kind of processing that information and trying to figure out what's the right travel for you, where you are in your purchase journey, or where you are in your kind of your planning stage, kind of what's your customer journey look like, what your purchase journey like. He is just observing those facts, he's listening in, he's reflecting, then he's reacting, right, based on the holistic information he has gathered. And of course, if you kind of deal with that person more frequently, he knows your history as well. So kind of taking all of that information and then being really helpful in terms of helping you plan. And that's the outcome we are trying to, at least, I mean, that's how I think about AI and ML to play a role in kind of making that customer journey so pleasant that customer feels that as if he or she is talking to a real person, and kind of then scaling it out to millions and millions and millions of customers to kind of get that same outcome, get the same experience. Same thing we're trying to do in, like, when at Blue Nile, the same thing, understanding customer data to understand their purchase journey, their journeys, and then reacting in a more appropriate and thoughtful way. Similar thing we're trying to do here as well at Allbirds, as really understanding why customers are shopping, what's the right product to show at what time, are they ready to buy, what could be the cross-sell. So kind of really being thoughtful around customer signals is what we are trying to achieve. We have just started. I think we are right now in the journey of building the MLOps, so we can start trying some next best actions, and so I would say we are very, very early. We're trying to get the basics right, kind of getting the data in place, where Rudderstack helped, and Snowflake is a place we're kind of putting everything together. So early in the journey, but we know where we are trying to go. And then challenges, as you pointed out, all three of them are challenges. And then it's good to be in a place now where you can kind of go and get vendors like Rudderstack and Continual to really solve and address some of those issues.
That's great. Yeah, the questions that you were rattling off there, like, what should we be predicting? Where's the right place to position this in front of a customer? Like, that's nothing like, what models should we use, or how are we going to get the data? Like, what you're thinking about there are the real business problems. So definitely Continual. That's what we're focusing on is, enabling people to be able to focus on the real hard questions that involve your business and your customers versus some of these other things like infrastructure and, who has the right skills and how are we going to do this at scale. Before we move on, anything else to add from the panel?
Yeah, I would just, I think Himanshu is dead right when he said, I think it's at eBay, they spend like 10% of their time actually kind of selecting models and working on that, and then the rest of it was doing like the data acquisition and data feature engineering type stuff. And I think that's true with a lot of legacy platforms out there where to solve an ML use case, there is like if you don't have this like centralized repository of all your data, you usually have to spend a significant amount of effort like acquiring the data, getting it into the right spot, and getting it along with the rest of your data so that you can actually build models. The way that machine learning works is you essentially have to give it all the data in one go for it to learn, and then it can build a model for you. And then the second part of it, which we haven't really talked about, is actually like maintaining a machine learning system over time. And this is a very non-trivial task, to say the least. If you're a high-tech company like an Uber or Netflix or an eBay, you probably have over the past decade built a lot of tools in this space to help you with this. The reality is a lot of companies out there are not going to have the personnel to adequately maintain these types of systems. So, this is one of our big, one of the big things at Continual that we're working on is, lowering the barrier for AI and ML to allow, smaller data teams who, don't have a bunch of people to sit around and like admin the system to actually come bring their use cases and get results quickly, and also to remove as many barriers in this ML workflow as possible. So like, you don't need, or you shouldn't need like a team of ML experts to build models. You shouldn't need a team of like DevOps people to maintain your system. With Continual, we believe we're building a system that, your current data team could use and get started and actually get production systems into your data workflow like within a couple weeks.
Great, thanks so much, Jordan. All right, just a couple more things to cover here. I want to remind folks, I see a couple questions rolling in. Please feel free to go ahead and start sharing those. We're almost to Q&A. Just want to wrap up here. So we've a lot of great learnings here. Himanshu, thank you so much. We've had the benefit of hearing about your awesome journey to mastering, really being able to unlock these intelligent experiences at scale. How can everybody do this? What can we, how can we get started today? Do we really, what do we need to get this done ourselves? So I want to hand it over to you, Walter, to just tell us, practically, for those who want to be like Himanshu, what can we get started with?
Sure. Thanks, Beth Ann. I can comment in terms of what we see with our clients, and I'm going to be humbled by the experience of Himanshu and Eric and Jordan in that respect. But yeah, I think and what you see on the screen here is really kind of a best of breed approach to solving for customer data driven use cases, right? So think of that as data collection and enrichment and transformation of that data, and machine learning and AI, which is Continual, which we've been talking a bunch about. And then, MessageGears, we play in this sort of segmentation and campaign management, and we send emails and push and SMS communication and send audiences out to Facebook and other places. So this is one approach. It's certainly not the only approach. I think the heart of this really is getting an organizational alignment around taking ownership of your first party data and picking one of these modern data clouds upon which to do that. And if your internal team isn't strong enough to kind of take you on this journey, then I would certainly recommend bringing in some solid, strategic advisory from what we call at MessageGears, kind of a modern data consultancy. And there's a bunch of great ones out there that are, well versed in this kind of approach that you guys see on the screen. And then from there, I think you can pick your use cases that are going to drive value. Do you start with data collection using a Rudderstack model for digital behavioral data? And then what about your bulk data from ETL? What is going to solve for that? You could start with AI/ML use cases to drive maximum value, you could tackle the customer engagement side, which is where MessageGears plays. But I think it all goes back to some sort of crawl, walk, run approach for your customer 360 on like a snowflake. And the good news there is there's a bunch of standardized approaches towards taxonomies now. Customer schemas, digital event data schemas, which is the world that Eric lives in, and transaction, schemas. Those are the kind of the pillars of customer data, right? Is like customer demographic, transaction history, and behavioral event data. At least that's what we see. So I'll stop talking. I would love others to comment on this as well.
Yeah, just one quick comment. I think when we talk about getting started or where do we start, and would love Himanshu and Jordan's thoughts on this as well. One interesting thing that we see is, in a way, a lot of companies are already doing this work. If you think about a traditional analytics workflow and say, analytics engineering or analysts, it's kind of, in the past, and even for a lot of companies today, they're doing an immense amount of collecting and cleaning of data. And unfortunately, that ends up like in a dashboard that 3 people look at, or a PowerPoint deck or something, right? And it's this huge amount of operational lift. And what's funny about that is that's not an ML ops workflow, but it's certainly a big part of an ML ops workflow, and it's a lot of the groundwork being done. And so we see a lot of companies who are realizing we're actually already doing a lot of this work, and in a world where it's easy to collect all of the data, and then you have a lot of the ML ops pieces taken care of by a provider like Continual, who removes all sort of the the DevOps overhead from the equation. You actually are just redirecting resources, right? You modify the tooling and the processes you use to collect customer data in the warehouse, build customer 360, do the customer journey, and amazingly, at the end, you get both really rich analytics that you can do wherever you want, and then you've also laid the groundwork for ML models, right? And if you don't have to do the DevOps, you can actually do things like a churn score, a lead score, really, really quickly, because 80% of the work in terms of the cleansing and the stuff that used to be done by an analytics team and completely separate from ML ops, those are converging now, right? And so your time to actually using an ML model to do something interesting, even if you don't even have a fully fleshed out data science team, is really, really fast, which is amazing. And so, Walter, to your point, it is kind of a new world. It's almost hard to believe that you can achieve that, because in the old world, it was millions and millions and millions of dollars to get the team and the infrastructure and all this sort of stuff to sort of produce those sort of results. But it's actually much easier and pretty fast today, at least from what we're seeing.
Yeah, there is a lot of overlap in the data you're going to be using for analytical purposes, and then the data you want to feed into your machine learning models. And I know in my work at Continual with clients, it's often the case that when they don't have features that we want to consider as input to models, we go and build them, of course, but they're actually usually interested in those for analytical purposes as well. So, someone like Walter can come to me and say like, hey, let's build a churn model. And then, we start looking at their like customer demographic information, their sales information. And then we're also interested in things like, how many emails have you been sent in the last 6 months? Have you clicked on those? How many ads have you been served in social media? Have you interacted with those? They often don't have the answers to those, but they have the data. So, you go in and you do some data analysis, and you can figure all that out. You put it into the model, and the model really likes these features because these are really describing how customers are engaging with your brand well. But then you're actually just curious of looking at those things over time as well, because like I'm just curious, like how often do people actually click on the emails over time and stuff like that. So there is a giant overlap there. So like if you are an organization who hasn't taken the step for ML yet, and you're thinking about it, if you have like a pretty good backbone, the uplift should not be that great to actually start getting some immediate results in this area. And then you know, this diagram I think is great because I always say like having a machine learning model is great, but then you have to do something with it. And so like showing MessageGears here as, you know, the customer engagement platform where, you know, like I can build a churn model and I can tell you like who are the top, you know, 1,000 customers who we think might churn in the next month. But if you don't do anything with it, it doesn't really matter. So you need to take those results and then make some action out of it. So like having a platform here like MessageGears who you can then go and start to engage with those customers and make sure they're happy and not churning is really kind of the closed loop system here.
Great. Yeah, this is, you know, thinking about this modern data stack ecosystem, all of these different solutions for different parts of the life cycle, the modularity here, all the cool things you can do is, it's really exciting. And I think we make it all sound really easy. So I want to turn to our final kind of lightning round question here. You know, we've talked about the possibilities, how easy this is. What is left to kind of tackle next? What are some of the pain points that remain despite this modern data, you know, integrated tools for the data lifecycle on the data warehouse approach? I want to give Himanshu the last word, and I will start with you, Walter. What do we have left to tackle here? Or what's the top thing?
You know, I think it's almost from a MessageGears perspective, it's almost like an awareness challenge. And I know that sounds simple, but I think educating the line of business and the head of analytics within these consumer-facing brands, or really within any brand, but you know, we tend to hang out with brands that have millions of customers of their own. Just building that awareness that there is this kind of new way of working that is really transformative. This isn't just an incremental lift, right? This is a radically different approach that brings together the data leadership with the line of business leadership in a way that's highly collaborative and highly results driven, and can be, I mean, we're talking substantial transformation, not in terms of operational efficiency, but also, you know, customer engagement ultimately, which drives revenue, as we all know. So we've got a ton of stories about this that we don't have time to tell today, but I would say it's an awareness thing, and certainly, I don't mean to poo-poo the data engineering skills that are required for some of this, but I think you know, that's what we see, at least.
Thanks, Walter.
I'll echo some of thoughts that Walter is saying. It's a twofold. One, of course, is the awareness problem, and the second is it's just sometimes too good to be true. It feels like magic that, hey, can you do it in this much time and you don't need that much money? I mean, I'll give you an example of Blue Nile, right? I mean, I don't know if Walter, you remember, we signed contract with you guys in, I would say, end of March, and we started the onboarding around April, late April, early May. In July, we launched the first test, and it was a vendor card email test. And by end of August, we actually showed that we created almost 35% more value. And in the process, I mean, 35% incremental value. And not only that, in this process, we actually sunset 2 of our legacy CRM system responses and another one. And that cost saving itself was pretty substantial. So not only we saved the cost, we had the PI in-house, we were able to create the value. And that was shocking to a lot of people, that you, in 3 months, you can go from 0 to this. So I think it's just like when I go and talk about that at Allbirds, like, hey, we did that in 3 months. And I mean, of course, Allbirds is a slightly different situation. We didn't even have the data collection. That's where we got Rudderstack. But it's sometimes it's so unbelievable that like even the awareness, you have to kind of sometimes show that this is possible. And luckily we just launched our first use case today, the real use case in Allbirds as well. So it's kind of just going from 0 to 60. It's easy to do. and that I think sometimes not easy to just conceive, just to conceptualize that it's possible. So just education awareness definitely plays a huge role, especially at senior leadership level, who have been grown up in the old SaaS, like very siloed way.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so easy, you almost forget to showcase it and sell the value. That's really interesting. And congratulations on deploying that use case. That's wonderful. Eric, let me get back to you. What is the one thing that you guys are working on over at Rudderstack in terms of pain points to solve for the future?
Sure, and I'll be brief here because we're coming up on time. I think, as with a lot of things, the biggest benefit of the modern data stack also is one of its challenges, and that is that you have this unbelievable amount of flexibility. You can combine these things to work in all sorts of different architectures with all sorts of different tools across all sorts of different data flows. And so, to Himanshu's point, it's a journey, and in some ways right now it's a choose your own adventure. And so I think we're still in early innings as far as the architectures that emerge that make a lot of sense, for different business models and stuff. And so while the use cases and the time to value are really amazing, leaders like Himanshu, to some extent, especially ones that don't have, maybe quite as much experience building this stuff from scratch, are, entering uncharted territory. And so I think, as vendors in this industry, we have a responsibility to help, define some of those architectures and help people, build a roadmap for them. Because, in a world of ultimate flexibility, people do all sorts of stuff, a lot of which is good, but not all of it. So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing.
Great, thanks. All right, well, Himanshu, I promised you the last word. We did have some questions that came in, but I think for the most part, we've been able to answer those just naturally through the discussion, but we'll certainly follow up with anyone. I just want to be conscientious of time. We have 2 minutes left. But Himanshu, I want to give you the last word. Do you have a call to action to the modern data stack ecosystem? What can folks do to make your life easier going forward?
I mean, as I said that, I kind of like look at in a construct, a template of data collection, data synthesize, and I think that the chart pretty nicely depicted that. Like for us is kind of how, just specifically, kind of going way on tactical side, like the biggest challenge for us is that how vendors can help us move fast. I think the biggest challenge for us is most of the time is the resourcing and team and the skill set. And I do feel a lot of time kind of we feel short on like what to do, how to do, and I think Walter raised that point of the modern day data consultants. Like this is something sometimes we feel that there's a gap in the market where it takes a while to adopt some of these solutions available in the market. So if anything could happen, I would like these kind of services a bit more could help the adoption of these kind of vendors and tools, make it much easier for a company like us who are not as skilled and as resourceful.
Wonderful, can certainly appreciate that. That's a great insight, thank you. All right, well, we're right at the hour. Real quick, Rudderstack has some cool Star Wars t-shirts for you guys if you reach out to them at rudderstack.com/unlockingAI. The MessageGears team told me that they're going to be selecting some lucky attendees for a t-shirt, so they will follow up with you, and we would love to hear from you at Continual. Just shoot us an email. Really want to thank the panel again. Himanshu, thanks so much for being our special guest, and thanks for everyone who dialed in today. Hope you have a great one.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.